Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Wednesday morning, talking tonight's awesome 11-game slate around the NBA. Before we dig in, one quick reminder, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. That way you get notified whenever I post a new video. Also, if you happen to stumble across this channel and you're not already following me on Twitter and subscribed to my projections package, make sure you take care of both those options. My Twitter handle is down below, at Brent Hyden1. Make sure you DM me once you follow me, to find out how you can sign up for projections, content, breakdown, and all that good stuff for a very affordable one-time price. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into this game because there is a lot to talk about. We have 4 games tonight with projected totals over 230 points, and then one game, which is Brooklyn and Cleveland, falling just shy of that mark at 229. So going to be very, very high scoring games tonight. The first one that we're going to talk about, Dallas at Atlanta. Dallas favored by 234.5 over under. We are going to get Luka versus Trae Young. The two picks were swapped for each other in this year's draft, so that's going to be an interesting storyline to follow as people try to compare Luka Doncic and Trae Young throughout the season. But getting to see these two go head-to-head early on is going to be pretty awesome. We have Trae Young coming in after dropping 35 points against the Cavaliers, 35 points and 11 assists against the Cavaliers last time out. Luka coming off a pretty solid game last time out. He's actually been great for them, Dallas, in their last couple of wins, averaging 22.5 points and shooting 50% from the floor. Both of those guys, fantastic options here against two teams that just don't play defense. Atlanta is ranks 4th in pace so far this season at 108.33 and 5th in points per game allowed at 122.7. Of course, as you'll hear me talk about a lot this season, pace does skew those defensive numbers. It's really tough to play defense whenever you're running up and down the floor faster than the speed of sound. But it's still something to really keep an eye on, just because, like I said, no defense from either one of these teams really at all. I absolutely love Trae Young in this spot. Dallas, a team that's really struggling in isolation and in transition. Young, not very efficient in transition, but 27% of his offensive possessions so far this season have come in transition. I mean, he's averaging 0.94 points per possession. As far as isolation goes, Trae Young 1.22 points per possession against a Dallas team that ranks in the 32nd percentile against transition defense. Sorry, they're worse than that. They're allowing 1.45 points per possession. They're terrible in isolation, which is something else that Trae Young very solid at. So Trae Young, an excellent place to start here at 7,200 on DraftKings. I'm perfectly fine with that price, and if you look, 7,800 over here on FanDuel, still a little too cheap for the upside that he has. One guy that I do have a lot of interest in this spot and comes in very affordable, not so affordable on FanDuel, but still very affordable on DraftKings, is Kent Bazemore. Over here on DraftKings, he is 5,300, coming off a very good game against Cleveland. This is going to be an up and down game again. I really like him in this spot. If you throw out that Memphis game, which he only played 22 minutes, it was a blowout. Excellent field goal attempt numbers here, 13 and 12. Just a guy that can kind of fill up the stat sheet, and he's another one. Leads the team in transition with 1.55 points per possession. So I really like Kent Bazemore at this $5,300 price on DraftKings. A good way in that mid-range to get exposure to this game. Also, Taurean Prince, just a fantastic all-around option. Pretty much someone that I would consider almost a core option at 7,200 over on FanDuel and 6,500 on DraftKings. Very tough to get away from him. He's tied for the lead with the Hawks as far as in isolation goes. He's very good in isolation, also in transition. So he's someone that I have a lot of interest in. Dwayne Dedman coming back tonight is going to put a little bit of a damper on Alex Lynn, who is actually questionable for this game. I expect him to be fine. The one guy that I want to keep an eye on is Amari Spellman. Spellman, we saw him break out against the Cavaliers. Started to look really good. I mean, we saw him put up 15 fantasy points in 8 minutes against the Knicks. If he's going to get over 20 fantasy points in this matchup, I actually have some interest in him as a value option tonight in tournaments. So someone to keep a little bit of an eye on. 3,700 on FanDuel. He kind of fits that if you want to punt the position and get that lowest score dropped. He's someone to consider here. Flipping over to the Dallas side, obviously DeAndre Jordan coming off 3 straight double doubles, another solid game against Chicago here. More of a cash option, I think, just at the 8K price tag. It's a little tough to stomach, but he's a guy basically feels like a 40-point floor, double upside out of him here. Obviously, Luka Doncic, just a great option here. 8,300 on FanDuel. I appreciate DraftKings for actually adjusting his position and giving him at least forward eligibility and not point guard only eligibility. 7,100 coming off a little bit of a down game. Still 14 field goal attempts, still shot really well. Just the rest of the peripherals weren't really there for him. I expect that to bounce back here. I absolutely love Luka in this spot. A guy I'm going to be trying to get a lot of exposure to. And then you can go back to Dennis Smith Jr. as well. We've seen kind of the production take a little bit of a hit with Luka being there. I expect those shooting numbers especially to come back up. But I like him in tournaments. That $6,300 price tag is really tough to get away from against an Atlanta team that really can't defend point guards. So I do like Dennis Smith Jr. in tournaments. Also, don't overlook Wesley Matthews, an Atlanta team that really can't defend the three-point line. Opponents are shooting 41% from 3 against them, and they're kind of struggling against spot-up shooters, which is basically Wes Matthews' forte. He just spots up and hits from 3, coming off 3 solid outings here. One really good one against Chicago, but those field goal attempts, those are really tough to overlook. So I really like Wesley Matthews in that mid-range tonight. Looking over at FanDuel, 5,400, a guy cash viable at that price tag. So I like him. Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy I never really have a lot of interest in, but it is definitely intriguing to see that he has been in the low to mid 20s as far as production goes in his first 3 games, and the minutes have been really solid for him. So a guy I think you can consider in cash games if you want to get some cheaper exposure to this game. Moving on, Brooklyn and Cleveland. This game coming in just under 230 points. Cleveland favored by 3. Cleveland allowing opponents to shoot almost 50% from the floor and like 44% from 3. It's not good. It's not good at all. I want to get exposure to Brooklyn in the spot. The only problem is with Rondé Hollis-Jefferson coming back and Shabazz Napier potentially coming back tonight. That rotation is going to get pretty convoluted pretty quickly, so it's really tough to anticipate any of these guys getting more than like 30 minutes. I have a lot of interest in Karis LeVert, leads the team in usage at 27.2%, but again, with them being back to full strength, we could see LeVert dip back down below 30 minutes as we saw against the Pacers. Obviously, that game, a little bit of a blowout, but he still has plenty of upside, even if he gets, 28, 30 minutes here tonight. So someone that you can get some exposure to. That price tag is a little up there. But again, the matchup really great for him tonight. D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, 2 guys you can look at in tournaments. But again, minutes concern for me in the spot with both of those players. So I'm probably going to be looking elsewhere. I do actually like Jarrett Allen a significant amount, 6,400 on FanDuel, much cheaper over here on DraftKings at 5,900. Coming off a bad game against the Pacers, but had been really good in those first 2 outings. And this is a Cleveland team that really struggles to defend in the paint. They're giving up almost 55 points in the paint per game. Opponents are shooting 68% against them at the rim, and they're really struggling against the pick and roll, especially the roll man. They're giving up 1.67 points per possession to the roll man this season. We know Jared Allen, a guy that just crashes to the glass with pretty violently most nights. So he has a ton of upside in the spot. He's a guy I absolutely love. Borderline cash, I think, but definitely tournament viable here. The biggest concern I have again is with Rondé Hollis Jefferson coming back. It could lead to a few less minutes if this game goes small, but I think Allen, a guy that you can definitely consider here. Flipping over to the Cleveland side of things, Kevin Love shot poorly from three against Atlanta, has not really shot very well to start the season, but 2 games with at least 10 free throw attempts, rebounding just ridiculously high. This Brooklyn team not great on the boards. Kevin Love, really tough to get away from at 8,800. We know the usage is going to be there for him. Leads the team in usage at 27.2%. Also leads the team in rebounding and scoring, obviously. I love Love in this spot. A guy that is probably going to be a core option even at 8,800. He has like 50 plus fantasy point upside in this matchup. Brooklyn continuing to get torched by big men. So Clarkson, a guy off the bench, second on the team in usage, has actually been playing pretty well for this Cleveland team. Had one down game against Toronto. That's kind of to be expected against a really good defense, but that 4,900 price tag for a guy that's getting mid-20s, and we know he has the ability to put up solid games in limited minutes. Clarkson leads the team in pick and roll ball handling frequency at 51.1%. He's averaging 1.0 points per possession in the pick and roll. Nets really struggling against the pick and roll ball handler. 1.08 points per possession allowed to the pick and roll ball handler. So Jordan Clarkson, 4,900 on DraftKings. He's also cheap over here on FanDuel at 4,700. A guy cash viable in the spot, even has tournament upside. So someone that I'd like getting exposure to if he fits your lineup. Not someone I'm forcing though. Chetty, feel free to go back to Chetty. Coming off a down game against Atlanta, still played 39 minutes, so that was really nice to see. It was just the scoring wasn't really there for him. But 5,800 on DraftKings, way too cheap. Just way too cheap for a guy that's putting up that kind of field goal attempts per game, and the peripherals are there for him. So Chetty, a guy, is probably going to be a core option for me tonight. Tristan Thompson, very, very interesting in this spot. Coming off a solid game against Atlanta, solid game against Minnesota. The return of Larry Nance is going to cut into his minutes a little bit, but even if he's getting 24, 25 against this Brooklyn team, Tristan Thompson, someone to definitely consider. And Larry Nance, if his minutes are going to go up to like the 18-20 mark, someone that has a lot of upside at his price tag, so someone to consider in tournaments there. Moving on to the Knicks at Miami. This game has a fairly high total at 224.5. Miami favored by 8 in this one. Lance Thomas, probable. Emmanuel Mudiay, questionable. Isaiah Hicks out. Udonis Haslem, questionable. Justice Winslow, probable. Hassan Whiteside, probable. Wayne Ellington and Courtney Lee are out. I don't have a lot of interest in this game despite the somewhat high projected total. I know the Knicks are playing pretty fast. Their defense has been mediocre, but as far as like what they're giving up in rebounding and three-point percentage allowed, they're pretty much in the middle of the pack. They do struggle in isolation. They're a 21st percentile defense in isolation, giving up 1.1 points per possession, and they're really struggling against the roll man, 1.52 points per possession. That is going to make Whiteside a very appealing option here. Kelly Olynyk an appealing option here, and Bam Adebayo someone to also consider. If Whiteside misses, Bam Adebayo would become pretty much a lock for me on the slate. But again, Whiteside is listed as probable, so not not someone that I'm going to look at unless Whiteside is ruled out. Whiteside in tournaments is perfectly fine. Um, and Dragic, Magruder, and Josh Richardson are the three names that I do have a little bit of interest in. Dragic coming in at 6,200 on DraftKings, a cash play here. He has basically a 30-point floor. Someone that I have a ton of interest in as far as just cash viability goes. And he's someone that is actually pretty good in isolation, 1.33 points per possession in isolation. So you can definitely go with some Goran Dragic here. Josh Richardson, we just like the field goal attempts and the usage is just really high for him. So again, someone that you can consider, not really a core option for me, but someone to at least consider if he fits your lineup. Rodney Magruder has been fantastic for this team. 4,900, a little too pricey, I think. But, I mean, we've seen the upside out of him, and the minutes continue to be there for him. So, someone that I think you can go back to. 4,500 on FanDuel, a little bit better price tag there. So, I don't hate using him. On the flip side of things, the Knicks, if Moutier comes back, that's going to make their point guard rotation just even more of a mess. So, I would get away from the Trey Burks and all that stuff. I skipped over Wade. Wade, just a guy, continues to put up solid fantasy production in limited minutes, high usage off the bench. So someone to consider. Again, not a core option for me there. But yeah, flipping back to the Knicks. Cantor, always GPP viable. Has been stellar to start the season, coming in at 7K. Coming off a down game against the Bucks, still had a double-double, but he's notched a double-double and at least 10 rebounds in every single game, so there is potential for him to put up a solid game here. Damian Dotson coming off his second straight good game, 3,500 on DraftKings. He's someone to consider. The minutes should be pretty solid for him with Knox being out. 4,100 on FanDuel. Probably out of consideration there. I don't buy the Mario Hezonja stuff. Anybody that's been following any of my advice for the past two seasons knows just Hezonja is just a guy. I don't see it. Like, I just don't see it. Has double-digit field goal attempt upside. Has 30-plus fantasy upside. If you want to chase the big game out of him, feel free. I'm not doing it, though. Yeah. Moving on, Minnesota at Toronto. Toronto favored by 8, 226.5 over under. Leonard, obviously, having no issues fitting in with Toronto here, averaging 25.7 points and 8.7 rebounds. For the Raptors, I do like him a lot in this spot. 8,700 on DraftKings. He is more expensive over here on FanDuel at 9,400, but perfectly fine to roll him out in any format. Kyle Lowry has looked really, really good in this offense, shooting 20 of 29 from the floor in the 3 games that he started alongside Leonard. The usage is not where I would like to see it, but the production has been there for him. Yeah, absolutely no issue going back to Kyle Lowry here. Someone that I do love in this spot against the Bucks or the Timberwolves, who have been one of the worst defenses in the NBA. I love Lowry in this spot, but I think I'm gonna get exposure to Danny Green. Danny Green, the 3 games that he's been with Leonard have been stellar. 26, 30, and 34 fantasy points. 3-point attempts are very, very interesting for him against a Timberwolves team that is allowing opponents to shoot 36% from 3. Yeah. Danny Green, a guy I absolutely love in this spot. Just too cheap for the upside he has, even at 4,900. He's a guy, whenever Leonard's in the lineup, I'm going to be considering Danny Green. He is averaging just over a fantasy point per minute when sharing the floor with Lowry and Kawhi. Interesting, Lowry, 1.31 fantasy points per minute when he's sharing the floor with Kawhi Leonard. So those 3 guys I have a ton of interest in. Jonas Valanciunas probably gets some extra minutes tonight to match up with Cat. Has a ton of upside, even though he's probably going to be maxed out at like 20 minutes here. Um, and Emmanuel Mudiay is ruled out. So yeah, um, but 5,600, just massive amounts of upside. You're just taking a lot of risk rolling him out, just because the minutes are not going to be really, really high for him. But in tournaments at 5,600 and 5,500 over here on FanDuel, one of the top tournament center options on the slate. Feel free to go back to the well with Ibaka as well. He has looked really solid, more of a cash game option in this spot, but someone that I do have a ton of interest in tonight. Flipping over to the Timberwolves, it's Butler and Teague for the most part for me. Teague coming in just a touch too cheap in this spot at 5,800. And Butler, a guy 8,100. We know the usage is going to be there for him. I think I'm going to go other places than Butler tonight. I don't like the matchup, and there's a couple guys that are a little bit cheaper that I think have more upside. But we know Butler's going to soak up a lot of usage. If Wiggins is out tonight, feel free to go to like Josh Okogie, who is going to, he's going to chuck. I mean, 13 field goal attempts in 24 minutes last time out. He's going to put up a lot of shots. Again, not the greatest of matchups for him, but he's a cheap option to consider. Moving on, we have Charlotte heading to Chicago to take on the Bulls. This game has a very high total, 231.5. Charlotte favored by 3. I guess they play each other again on Friday too. Cool. Bulls allowing 122 points in their 3 straight losses to start the season. That has me very, very interested in a lot of these guys. That starts with Kemba Walker. Usage up to 33% on the season. The production has been just fantastic for him. I mean, just look at those field goal attempts. 22 against Toronto, 31 against Miami, 16 against Orlando in 27 minutes, 29 against Milwaukee. This game stays close, and he's going to put up 25-plus field goal attempts. Kemba Walker is going to smash that $8,400 price tag. He's $8,400 on FanDuel, too. A guy I'm going to have a very, very hard time getting away from in this spot. The rest of the guys, I do like Nick Batum. Nick Batum, a guy we know he has triple-double upside. Coming off, a couple down games, but 5,500 in this spot. Going to play a ton of minutes. Can rebound really well against a Bulls team that is struggling to rebound. They're also struggling in transition. Batum, so far this season, 1.63 points per possession in transition. Batum is an excellent option in all formats tonight, but just has massive GPP upside against this Bulls team. Jeremy Lamb still getting the start, but the minutes in those mid-20s has potential to smash that salary at 5,100. I think he's right around the same thing over here, 52 on FanDuel. Has potential to smash that salary, but the guy I'm looking at the most is Malik Monk coming off the bench, 4,800 on FanDuel, 4,700 on DraftKings. He's going to continue to get minutes in the mid-20s and put up double-digit field goal attempts. He just has to hit those shots, and if he falls into a couple of rebounds or assists or even a steal or something against this Bulls team that is terrible, Malik Monk can absolutely crush that salary. So he's someone that I have a lot of interest in as well. I love him at that price tag. Cash viable definitely in this spot, but has GPP upside as well. So you could actually probably roll out like Walker, Batum, and Monk here and be really solid. And then you can run it back with Zach LaVine, who is just going to just smash. Continues to play a ton of minutes. The usage is through the roof, and without Chris Dunn there, we know the production is going to take a little bit of a boost for him. So against a Charlotte team that is kind of struggling to defend the three-point line, and LaVine shooting really well from 3, LaVine, a guy I would have a lot of exposure to in this spot. Back to Charlotte real quick. I don't hate like Hernan Gomez or Cody Zeller as value center options here. Hernan Gomez, we know, can put up big games in limited minutes. The minutes are just the issue for him here. Cody Zeller, though, if he's going to get mid-20s against this Bulls team that can't rebound and can't defend the rim, Cody Zeller has potential to smash that salary. So I like Zeller as a value option. And then MKG continues to put up solid numbers off the bench, coming off a bad game against Toronto, but really solid numbers off the bench. A little bit too cheap for the upside he has. Flipping over to the Chicago side, I've obviously already talked about LaVine. Yeah, it's Zach LaVine. The dude's going to be like 9K soon if he continues to score like he has. I mean, over 30 real points in 3 straight games. He's going to get you there just about every single night. So I do like Zach LaVine a lot, especially at his price tag. With Chris Dunn out, we know Cameron Payne. He's going to have games where he puts up big time outings like this Detroit game. But Cameron Payne is bad at basketball. Yeah, he's bad. Don't play Cameron Payne tonight. I would be looking at Arcidiacono here coming in 3,500 on DraftKings, and he is 3,500 on FanDuel. I definitely prefer him over Cameron Payne. Diacono just has more of a ceiling, and when Cameron Payne struggles, which he is going to do, Arcidiacono is going to get the run, and I like him more than Cameron Payne. I'm probably going to try to avoid that entire situation if possible, though, just because I don't want to deal with it. Bobby Portis, still way too cheap, I think, for the upside he has. 6,900, perfectly fine in that price at that price tag. Minutes and production are going to be there for him. I know he's coming off a somewhat down game, but he has double-digit rebounding upside, as we've already seen this season. And then Wendell Carter Jr., 4K on DraftKings. It's a good spot for him to actually finally put up a big game. We saw him get the 32 minutes last time out. He has the potential. I'm not touching that 5,200 price tag on FanDuel. Not even going near that. That's way too high. But at 4K on DraftKings, I can understand rolling him out tonight as a value option. Moving on, we have Utah taking on the Houston Rockets, 220.5 over under. Houston, 2.5 point favorites. Really tough to get away from James Harden in the spot, even against a Jazz team that has generally held him in check. We know the usage is going to be there for him with no Chris Paul. The biggest issue I have is they're starting Michael Carter-Williams and Eric Gordon alongside him. That lineup together, it's been very, very small sample. They've only played 11 minutes together, but they have an 84.6 offensive rating. Michael Carter-Williams just kills that team's spacing whenever he's on the floor with Harden and Gordon. It's so bad. Like, Michael Carter-Williams does not need to be playing minutes. I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to fade Harden personally, but I understand wanting to roll him out just because that usage is going to be sky high for him tonight. I do love Eric Gordon in the spot. The Jazz struggled against spot-up shooters a lot last season. They're also really struggling to defend the three-point line. Opponents are shooting 39.4% from three against them. Eric Gordon, we saw him put up a solid game here against the Lakers last time out. The minutes we know or the Clippers, sorry. Last time out, we know the minutes are going to be there for him. The field goal attempts are going to be there for him. At 5,800 on DraftKings, he is also fairly cheap over here at 5,600 on FanDuel. He's my guy to get exposure to the Houston side of this game. So I like Eric Gordon a significant amount, even though it is a somewhat more difficult matchup. If you want to roll MCW, I get it. We expect the minutes to be fairly solid for him. He's averaging just over a fantasy point per minute so far this season, but he just sucks at basketball. He's bad. I don't hate Clint Capella. We know he's going to get the run here going up against Rudy Gobert. Would be a tournament guy only for me. And then on the other side of this, Houston really struggling against the roll man this season. Their defense has not been as good without Luke Richard and Mbah a Moute. and Trevor Ariza in that lineup. They're giving up 70 points per game in the paint, and they're allowing 1.56 points per possession to the roll man in the pick and roll, 1.06 points per possession on post ups. That makes Rudy Gobert someone that I have a significant amount of interest in. Has struggled historically against the Rockets in the past, but again, that's because I think a lot of that has to do with Luke Richard and Mute and Ariza being there, spacing the floor a little bit. They don't necessarily have that floor spacing without those guys. You now have like Carmelo soaking up a lot of usage in the paint. So I like Rudy Gobert a decent amount. Not someone I'm looking at in cash, but definitely someone to consider in tournaments. Outside of those guys, Ricky Rubio feels just way too cheap at 5,600, going up against Michael Carter Williams' defense. I like Rubio a decent amount. Has not really been that great to start the season, but he's someone I think can put up a pretty big game here. So I have a decent amount of interest in Ricky Rubio. Donovan Mitchell, perfectly fine in all formats. Has not had really the Mitchell game that we've expected out of him, but he's got a safe floor. I think you can definitely roll him out in cash games, and he has tournament upside. Scranton Strangler, Joe Ingles. For you Office fans, you'll probably understand that reference since he looks like a specific Office character. Continues to put up a lot of shots. Struggled from three against Memphis, but those first two games where he was over 60% from three, still a great option here. And I don't hate Jay Crowder as a cheap option in that mid-range in a game where you should see close to 30 minutes. Jay Crowder has potential to kind of crush that salary as well. And I did skip over one guy, Gerald Green. We expect the minutes to go up even more now that James Ennis is out. If he gets 24 minutes off the bench, he's the guy I have the most interest in for a value option from the Houston side of this game. Moving on to a rather unappealing game here, we have Indiana taking on the Spurs, 214 over under San Antonio, 2.5 point favorites. DeRozan averaging 29.3 points. He has not scored below 28 real points in any game, any of the three games this season. 7,900 for DeRozan, even at going up against like Victor Oladipo. Very, very solid price tag for him. I have a lot of interest in DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. Aldridge we saw just crush in that Lakers game. Obviously, we know the minutes were up, but like if he's going to get 36 plus minutes every single night, which he's done so far in the first three games, rebounding potential is there for him. Scoring in the paint is going to be there for him. LaMarcus Aldridge, really tough to get away from at that $8,500 price tag there. He is 9,100 on FanDuel. A little easier to get away from that price because like you have Kevin Love for cheaper, but I would not say no to pairing like Love and Aldridge together in this spot. On the flip side, Spurs defensive rating this year 122. They have played in a couple of like paced up games, so that's gonna be a little bit inflated. But their transition defense has been terrible. That's going to be a boost to like Thaddeus Young and Victor Oladipo. Both those guys perfectly fine in the spot. I'm just probably going to be looking elsewhere than this game outside of like DeRozan or Aldridge tonight. Moving on, Philly, Milwaukee, 220.5 over under Milwaukee, 5.5 point favorites. Obviously, we need to monitor the status of Ben Simmons. The quote that I read going into this morning was like Ben Simmons basically said they're not going to rush it. He's just going to see how it feels today. That makes me think that there's a decent chance he sits this game out, but we'll know pretty early on in the afternoon if he's even truly going to be questionable or if he's closer to the doubtful side. So something to keep an eye on. Obviously, Embiid, it is a back-to-back, and it is coming off an overtime game. That does have me a little bit concerned. I would say there is a greater than 0% chance that he sits tonight, but I wouldn't put that percentage very high. And if he plays, obviously, against Milwaukee, team that we've historically wanted to take centers against for seasons, Embiid would be really tough to get away from. We saw him put up a massive game against Detroit after playing 39 minutes. The rebounding potential, scoring potential is going to be there for him. So he's a floor option for sure, but has plenty of upside in this spot. We saw JJ Redick the last 2 games without Ben Simmons absolutely just destroy. 20 field goal attempts in back-to-back games, over 40 fantasy points in back-to-back games, 30 real points. The rebounds and assists are going to be there for him, and that makes him really, really appealing. So far this season, without Simmons on the floor, Redick almost 31% usage rate, and averaging 1.33 fantasy points per minute. He's going to be very popular coming off those 2 massive games, but price tag has not adjusted to what he is capable of putting up. So I love Redick in this spot. Just too cheap for the extra field goal attempts and assists and all that stuff that he's going to get. Fultz minutes last night were a little bit limited. But as far as production goes, it was still solid for him. I mean, 23 fantasy points in 21 minutes. The shooting was really nice to see, 66%. The rebounding was there for him. Back to the well with Fultz for me. In the spots, TJ McConnell, we saw him get the majority of the minutes. He put up a solid outing after 32 minutes there, 25 fantasy points. No issues going back to McConnell. One of the better value plays in the spot. Landry Shamet got the start, did not produce. 5 field goal attempts in 24 minutes. He's a guy. He's just a guy. He's a value play. Has upside. We've seen the upside out of him actually in that Chicago game where he played 29 minutes. He just has to hit those field goal attempts and fall into a couple peripheral stats. But he has upside if he's going to get the start. So he's someone to consider at that $3,200 price tag if you're trying to fit in some higher priced guys. Saric, a guy I have a lot of interest in. So the same with Covington. Guys that you can definitely consider. And if something were to happen, like if Embiid were to not play this game, Mike Muscala coming in might be limited on a back-to-back after missing like the entire preseason. But he's a name to keep an eye on, and the same with Amir Johnson. He's another name to keep an eye on if Embiid does not suit up in this one. Flipping over to the Milwaukee side of things, obviously Giannis, 36.3% usage rate to start the season. Excellent option here. We know that the Sixers are going to be a little tired coming in off of an overtime back-to-back. Giannis has been stellar for this team, and he's going to get better. He talked about how he's not comfortable in this Budenholzer offense yet, but he's already putting up, just massive numbers. Those rebounding numbers are just insane. Going up against the Sixers team that has not been great as far as rebounding goes this season. So I like Giannis a significant amount. He's one of the studs that I have the most interest in here. But if you're not getting exposure to Giannis, I feel like Middleton continues to just be overlooked. Very underrated guy. Production has just been insane for him. Minutes, solid. Field goal attempts are solid. I love Chris Middleton in the spots. He's a great way to get exposure to this game. One of the team's best spot-up shooters. Sixers have struggled against spot-up shooters so far this season, 1.45 points per possession allowed, and they're getting torched from 3. Opponents are shooting like 38% from beyond the arc against them. If he's going to be taking 6, 9, 8 3-point attempts, yeah, Middleton has a ton of upside here. The same goes for Bledsoe and Brogdon. Both these guys are really, really good options, ways to get exposure here tonight. So I like Bledsoe a lot, and I like Brogdon as well. Don't overlook John Henson. His minutes have not really been that good, but he's been producing really, really solid numbers in limited minutes. He has upside in this spot. Again, he's someone that's been spotting up from beyond the arc a little bit more. One of the team's better spot-up shooters as well, which is kind of shocking to see. But John Henson, a guy that you can definitely consider as a value play tonight. Moving on, Lakers at Suns. This game, 237 over under 2.5 point favorites for LeBron and the Lakers. Yeah. LeBron, 32 points, 14 assists, 8 rebounds against the Spurs. Yeah. LeBron, obviously a great option. Really tough to ignore him at that price tag, 11-1. He is 11-5 on FanDuel. Yeah. Definitely get some exposure to LeBron. If you're paying up for a star, it's probably LeBron, then Giannis for me tonight, and then like Curry. Yeah, LeBron, great spot for him. The rest of the Lakers, though, we know Kuzma, the minutes and production is going to be really good for him. I have a ton of interest in Kyle Kuzma. Lonzo Ball, 6,300, 30 coming off 33 minutes, has triple-double upside in this matchup tonight. I love Lonzo Ball, going to be a core point guard option for me here. He's been shooting really well to start the season. The Suns really struggling against spot-up shooters, 1.07 points per possession allowed. Really struggling in transition. That's spots where Lonzo Ball can really take advantage of this defense. So I love Lonzo Ball here. And Josh Hart continues to be a little bit underpriced for the upside he has. So I would have a lot of interest in Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball. If you're going to be fading LeBron, I would have one or both of those guys and maybe some Kuzma. I have absolutely no issue with like stacking the living crap out of this game. There's going to be a lot of fantasy production from this game. You can go back to Lance Stevenson as well, and you can go back to JaVale McGee, 5,300. Feels like 30 fantasy points is his floor. Like it's just, I mean, it's been there for him so far. Fouled out against the Spurs, but the 28 minutes, really good to see that. So I like him here against the Suns team that's really struggling in the paint. 54.7 points per game allowed in the paint this season. JaVale McGee has like smash potential in this spot. The other guy would be Jonathan Williams. I don't dislike taking a shot on him in tournaments at that $3,100 price tag. If McGee gets in foul trouble, which is definitely a possibility, Williams could get some run here. I kind of like him in tournaments at that price tag. He opens things up for you a lot, and he would be someone to take a shot on FanDuel. What is his price tag? 3,700. He would be a guy to take a shot on, I think, on FanDuel especially, even in cash, because you know his score is going to be dropped if he's not any good. Flip it over, Devin Booker. Yeah, I love me some Devin Booker. Just been outstanding, been matchup proof to start the season. Yeah, Devin Booker is just in an amazing spot here. Averaging almost 30 points per game. Lakers, 117.2 defensive rating, 108.72 pace. Opponents are shooting 41% from three against them. Struggling in spot-up shooters. Struggling in isolation. Just looking at the numbers for Devin Booker last season in isolation. 11.7% frequency, ranked in the 46th percentile, so not great, but as a spot-up shooter, 82nd percentile. Didn't do it very much, just 2.2 points per game on spot-ups last season, but Devin Booker, yeah, he's a guy, if you're getting a lot of Lakers exposure, I would have Devin Booker in your lineups for sure. I like Warren off the bench. His role and usage is really solid. He's embraced that role, and he has upside. I mean, we saw it against the Warriors, but he's going to get 22, 24 minutes and get those double-digit field goal attempts. 4,800 over there on DraftKings, 57 on FanDuel. A good way to get mid-range exposure to what should be a very high-scoring game. Trevor Ariza minutes came down against Denver. But back up against Golden State. Production wasn't there in those two games, but didn't shoot very well. I still think Ariza is viable. I just think I'm going to look other places. And then we have DeAndre Ayton coming off a massive game against the Warriors, where some people thought he could get run off the floor. But 20 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists. DeAndre Ayton should just feast in this spot. I love DeAndre Ayton in all formats. Dude just comes out and puts up like 40 plus fantasy points almost every single night. Did it almost every night in the preseason. JaVale McGee, not really someone that I would expect DeAndre Ayton to struggle against. So DeAndre Ayton should just smash in this spot. Moving on, we have Memphis at Sacramento. Garrett Temple is probable. Dylan Brooks doubtful. Chandler Parsons out. JaMychal Green out for the Grizzlies. So they're shorthanded. That's going to open up a lot of minutes for Jaren Jackson Jr. in a fantastic matchup against the Kings team that has been up in pace. Their defensive rating has been terrible. They're giving up like 66 points in the paint per game. That was before last night against Denver. They're giving up 49 rebounds per game. Jaren Jackson Jr. Lots of upside in the spot. Had a good game against the Jazz. I realize, 23 fantasy points, not that great, but pretty solid outing against the Jazz. Jaren Jackson Jr., one of the few guys from Memphis I have a lot of interest in. Viable in all formats, cash, GPPs, has tons of upside here. The other guy that I do have a significant amount of interest in is Garrett Temple. Was not on him in the last game. It wasn't really a Temple game, but the minutes just outstanding for him. The field goal attempts have been really solid for him. This is a spot against a Kings team that, one, has struggled against shooting guards historically, and they really struggle against spot-up shooters. 1.06 points per possession. Spot-up shooters, 1.30 points per possession in transition. Temple so far this season, 1.27 points per possession on spot-ups. And if you look at his transition numbers last season, he was really good in transition last season as well. So I have a lot of interest in Garrett Temple in the spot, and it's a revenge game for him. So you have that. I mentioned Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., but 1.33 points per possession on spot-ups. So really, really good spot for him. I like getting exposure to both of those guys in the spot. Conley and Gasol, two guys I think are perfectly fine in tournaments. Gasol a little more cash viable, so I don't hate going there. Outside of that, Kyle Anderson, a value play. We expect him to get a decent amount of minutes with all the injuries this team has against a Kings team that struggles to defend the rim. He's someone that I think could have a decent amount of success here. And then Omri Caspi didn't get the run that I thought he would last game. It could happen here. I definitely think it could happen here, and it's a revenge game for Caspi. So tournament punt option at 3,400. On the flip side, pretty much just off of the Kings. Bagley had a really good game last night against the Nuggets. The minutes were there for him. I would be willing to go back to the well for Bagley. Maybe some Giles in this spot. Not really too terribly intrigued there. De'Aaron Fox perfectly fine in GPPs. Justin Jackson not getting a ton of minutes, mid to upper 20s, but has been producing really well in those limited minutes in the last couple games. You could consider him on like FanDuel, but I'd rather look elsewhere. Moving on, we have the Wizards heading to Golden State to take on the Warriors. 235.5 over under. Golden State double 10.5 point favorites. Jan Mahimi is questionable. Dwight Howard is out. Klay Thompson probable. Sean Livingston is questionable. This game, I have a lot of interest in the Washington side of this game, even though they're 10.5 point underdogs. Especially if Mahimi sits. If Mahimi sits, Washington's going to go small a lot. You're going to get a lot of minutes for Kelly Oubre. You're going to get Markieff Morris at the 5. You're going to get Jeff Green getting minutes. You're going to get a lot of minutes for Otto Porter. All these guys, all those forwards, fantastic options pretty much in all formats. We saw Oubre and Porter just smash against the Warriors in a couple games over the last couple seasons. John Wall, someone that I have a lot of interest in. But the forwards, I think, are the way that I'm going to get exposure. In a very small sample, we're dealing with like a handful of minutes, like 11 or 12. Markieff Morris, when sharing the floor with Oubre, Porter, Wall, and Beal, 1.99 fantasy points per minute. Wall, 1.38. But if you extrapolate that dating back to last season, you have Wall, 1.22 fantasy points per minute. Markieff, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. And Bradley Beal, 1.03. Markieff should crush in this spot, especially at his price tag. I have a ton of interest in Markieff, especially if this game goes small. But Kelly Oubre and Porter, two guys, like Porter has just massive GPP winning upside, like 50 plus fantasy point upside. We've seen him hit it twice against the Warriors over the past couple seasons. He would be a guy that I would definitely consider getting exposure to, especially on DraftKings. But like on the flip side of this, like again, Oubre, very, very good option, but even Wall and Beal, very tough to imagine them not getting on top of their salaries. Beal coming off really, really solid games in back-to-back outings, but feel free to roll either one of those guys out. But the forwards are really where I'm going to be looking. Really not a lot that needs to be said about the Warriors. Stephen Curry has been just on fire. He is below 10K. Perfectly fine using Stephen Curry, especially here on FanDuel at 9,300. I love me some Steph Curry on FanDuel. You can KD if you want a KD taking on his hometown team. But like Draymond Green, this Wizards team cannot rebound to save their life. Giving up 59 rebounds per game. They're really, really bad defending the pick and roll, especially the roll man. Draymond Green's going to have a massive game soon. It's coming. It's going to happen. So I would definitely be getting some exposure to Draymond Green at that price tag. Jones and Looney, excellent value options. Jones' minutes have been solid for him. Lower 20s, but still solid for him. So I do have some interest in Jones and Looney as value options again against a Wizards team that's really can't rebound to save their lives. So that's it. That's 11 games. Lots to talk about. Like I said, very high scoring games. I would definitely be stacking some of those high scoring games. Maybe get some value option from the mid, the games in the mid 220s. But yeah, that pretty much does it. I will be back tomorrow talking tomorrow's slates. And good luck tonight.